Hello everyone, today I'm going to be talking about frost, spells and combos. The build I'm going to be showing off today is Zool the Slug, a old DS3 character of mine, now remade here in Elden Ring. This is a battle mage, if you will, that specializes in the use of frost weapons and all of the blade sorceries, like Carrion Slicer for example. This build uses Sourceal and the Intelligence Ring to get the stat requirements I'm going for. Also having somewhat decent poise and having my fashion ring on at the same time. I have optimized around the idea that I can hard swap my staff on and off if need be. That said, now let's get into this. I've decided to split this video into two parts. One focusing on the melee aspect of this build and one on the spell aspect of this build. What you're seeing right now is the primary melee setup of this build, which is the discount Onyx Blade with frost applied to it, with a offhand clean rod rapier coupled with arcane bombs, which you will see are really strong. Once you learn to free aim them, they are probably your strongest weapon in the entire arsenal. Also, it should be mentioned that you can't really combo the discount Onyx Blade the same way you could as in DS3, but the frost buff is considerably better, if you ask me, than the original Onyx buff is. A thing worth noting about great swords on a build like this is that your lack of poise and innate hyper armor does push you towards the narco setup. If you can, you should for the most part try and leverage the frost buff as much as possible, although I find myself using Storm Stomp like always to sort of guarantee combos. That being said, once again, bombs are your best friend. You can see that I'm dealing almost 500 damage. I'm actually doing 509 damage at times on this Phantom. You should really be trying to abuse these bombs as much as possible, especially since you can actually free aim them as well as like this. That being said, as always, Storm Stomp is your best friend, especially on builds like these where you can actually apply a effect like Frost, which just adds all the more pressure to your weapon setup, especially my double rapier setup. Here they get a little clap for their efforts. I will clarify right now that as much as I love the physical aspect of this build, it is in many ways not as strong as the spell aspect of this build. You do get a lot of potential burst damage through the frost procs, but it is a bit slower than the, say for example, Carrion Slicer burst that you can get, or Carrion Piercer combo burst. However, that is why I'm using the magic bombs as much as I am, to try and compensate for the lack of like here and now damage. And as you'll see in some of these invasions, you end up needing to use your tools a lot more than you might otherwise do when you're using a build like these. Bombs, as I've said a million times already, they are your best friend here. But also as you might have seen me already use, all the gravity shards are also a good friend of yours when you're using a build like this. The fact that you can area denial with it can help out a lot. Especially in a place like this where you can narrow people into these tight corridors, or PvE support can also help you and will also take advantage of the stun. And here of course Jarman is being our best friend once again. And again, Frost does make up for the lower damage by doing the burst we needed. And that's just it. Also, in case of some of you like me like to keep a nuclear option on you, on a build like this, the sleep swords are actually one of the best options, especially against overlevel phantoms, as you can see here. They become very easy to kill once you can just stun lock them. Here, before I get into the spells themselves and their combos, I just want to quickly mention that Night Maiden's Mist is the only typical spell I brought on this build, and this here is the reason why. This here alone, this should be all the reason you have to actually equip it yourself. The main spell combo I want to talk about in this video is this one. Storm Stomp into Roll Catch Carrion Piercer, followed up by Carrion Slicer. No matter what you're doing, if someone panic rolls after getting hit by Storm Stomp, they will get hit by the Piercer. And then you can typically follow up with a Slicer and get them, especially if you do the running attack afterwards. Side note, one way to consider your bombs, as you'll see here, is to consider them as a extra spell of sorts, since they do cost FP just the same way as your spells. And they deal a lot of damage too, for that matter. Part of what makes these spell combos so good is the prediction game you can start employing. If someone will panic roll out of stun from the Storm Stomp, you should always try to pierce them, since that'll catch them. But if you know they'll try and hit out of stun, you should try and slice them, since that will often let you slice them a second time after they get hit the first time, as they will then panic roll afterwards. And also, the amount of pressure you get with running Carrion Slicer is just absurd. Every spell build should honestly have it. That is about all I wanted to say in this video. If you haven't already tried it, I highly suggest you try a Dex Int build, specifically a Frost Mage Blade, as you can see I'm using here. Not only is it a lot of fun, it's also a pretty learning experience. This was the build that made me like spells in Elden Ring. The combos, all the mix-ups, it is 100% what made me fall in love with spells so far. And I imagine it will make a lot of you fall in love with it too. That being said, the rest of this video will just be a few compilations of my favorite clips I gathered while playing. Hope you enjoy, and thank you all for watching.